Hi there, good afternoon viewers, and welcome again to another edition of Globespan 24/7. We have a special segment this afternoon, and as I informed you all that this is going to be a second segment because it's Child Abuse Prevention Month and Sexual Violence Awareness Month. What I do want to say before we begin is that again, this is another sensitive subject, and it's going to be a little bit more sensitive with language that might be used. So kindly, if there are children in the space, please ask them to, move from the space to, you use your discretion, right, based on the age. So let me just continue by saying that I want to thank you all for tuning in to Globespan 24/7. I've had some feedback from our team that the viewers are coming in really well for the last couple of months, and it's excellent. So I want to thank you on behalf of myself, our entire team from Globespan 24/7, along with our phenomenal women that are bringing you some of the shows, myself, Dianne Madray, from Let the Women Speak. We have Pastor Lisa Singh, who comes on with Affairs of the Heart, Keeping It Real, on the last weekend of the month. And then we have Tracy Can from Guyana, who comes in on some of our women issues too. So we have three strong women, myself included, who are bringing some of these shows to you, as well as our political voices coming in every Saturday at 2 p.m. So again, I want to thank you all for tuning in and giving Globespan the opportunity of expanding, engaging, embracing, and educating our community throughout the Caribbean, the United States, Canada, and across the globe, because our viewership has expanded places that I actually didn't imagine. So thank you for bringing us into your space. Keep in mind that Globespan platform is about the 3 Ds. And the Ds are the dialogue, the debate, and the discussion. And I must say, this is not about drama. So the drama is not part of the D's in this. And on this particular topic today, I must say, on behalf of all the women who are going through sexual violence and sexual assault, rape, or however you want to relay it, please know that this is not a slander topic, So keep that in mind. And those who are on social media or anywhere that refer to this as gossip or slander, know that, what you're actually doing is you are re-traumatizing victims, right? So if someone is tuning in and actually hearing that you're referring to this as slander, they're not going to want to come out, especially if someone who hasn't come out. So I'm asking anyone who is tuning in, who might know someone, or if you have done it, please be a little bit more sensitive on the choice of words when you are referring to someone, even if you don't know they're a victim. So that's all I'm asking. So I would appreciate, and I'm speaking as a therapist, along also, as an advocate and an activist who, do this kind of work. It's very important, and I'm very passionate about this work. So when individuals are doing stuff like that, it really troubles me, and I'm disappointed because of some of the things I've seen lately. So as I said, let me introduce myself again. My name is Dianne Madray from Let the Women Speak. So thank you again for tuning in. I am an advocate, an activist. I'm also a certified paralegal. But when I say certified paralegal, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not here to give you advice. But what I will do is, I will get the professionals, as we're doing today, for the information that we will bring to you. We will do all the homework and the research to provide that information to you correctly. It's like going to international, a patent lawyer, and you have a criminal matter, or an intellectual properties lawyer, and it's about sexual violence. It doesn't work that way. An international properties lawyer or a patent lawyer is not going to be able to tell you about sexual violence and the laws and so forth. So try to find someone who is skilled and trained in this specific area, as we have in our team. Also, that will be coming in as Globespan's consultant for the mental health aspect, who is a certified, trained individual on trauma therapy and counseling. And, you know, we're putting our full support behind her in giving us this opportunity in tuning in with us and providing the information necessary. So this is going to be a very interesting show. And again, let me just say, if there are children in the space, kindly use your discretion and remove them from the room, at least for the next hour or so. Now, let the woman speak. It's about making changes, bringing platforms, and transforming the space that we are in. Today, Let the Woman Speak brings to you beyond the Me Too movement. And we know that the Me Too movement started between 2017, 2018. It went up to Time's Up with a lot of the actors. We know some of the cases that came forward, Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby. It's transformed so much. But guess what? It sort of ended up evolving into the religious institutions. And that was heartbreaking for me to hear, you know. And it's funny when you're not in a situation and you start reading and hearing stories of people calling you about stuff, it starts to open up your eyes and sensitize you to some of these issues that are happening right in our community. So guess what? Today, mothers will rise up and unite. They're getting MAD, M-A-D. And remember what I said MAD is? It's motivated and determined for change. So we have mothers in the audience here today, and those of you who are mothers who are tuning in. And we have a special guest with us who is a mother. So we're also going to talk about what a perpetrator looks like. So we're going to get the feedback from our representative from the New York City prosecutor's office in New York, and you'll hear a little bit more about him. So before I introduce to you our guests in-house and on Skype, I just want to kind of give a shout out to our guests in our last session when we have Swan Woman, you know, struggles over female daughters with Chitra Singh and Dianne Benskin. And that was such an emotional subject. Swan Woman, struggles of the female daughters. And people gave some responses, feedback on the chat. And also, I got some calls and some messages. And it was important, you know, it warmed my heart to hear some of the feedback that we got. And because of that, we're going to be bringing you a lot more informative sessions to this. So as we're continuing here today on Globespan, please go to the Globespan 24/7 Facebook page, click like, share, and I'm asking you in the next 30 seconds, tag as many people as you can in this session and this episode today, because it's going to be very, very important. And we need to ensure that our community here in New York, across the United States, Canada, and all over are tuned in. Today we're in New York focusing on the laws of New York. But if there's anyone that has issues that are happening within this framework that we're talking about, you'll let us know. Inbox us on Globespan 24/7 Messenger. We check it. Also, what I try to do on the episodes that I host, I usually go back to it and I look and I read your comments. So if there's anything that's pressing, I try to see how we can address it, right? So if you can do that. So again, a big shout out to Chitra Singh, who's tuning in right here from New York, and our girl Dianne Benskin, who is in North Carolina and is bringing in all her Trinidad posses tuning in with us today. So, and these are guests that we are going to bring back. We're going to bring back repeat guests in addressing some of these issues. So keep tuning in. So as we continue on this dialogue, I hope you guys like my hat. So as we're tuning in, we're going to be able to hear from a parent, a mother, who is going to process the behavior of a perpetrator who may have violated her child, particularly in the religious institutions. Please note well, and as a disclaimer, we are referring to allegations, case scenarios, no police reports, no investigations. Now, let me ask you this. What do you do when a child comes to you and says, Mom and Dad, Pandit worthless molested me? And I say worthless because I'm so darn disappointed to hear that this is actually happening. And I'm not talking about here just in New York. I'm talking about Texas. And I'm going to show you, we're going to hit up on screen some stories that our team were able to find in the process of this segment. So can we have some of those up on screen? So take a look at this one. The Nottingham Imam. So this is happening between the Muslim, we're hearing a lot about the Catholic religion. There's over 300 cases that are happening that happened in the state of Pennsylvania, right? And it's coming out a lot more. It's not just the pastors of the Catholic Church. There are nuns that are getting accused. Nuns are now accusing the pastors and the priests. We're also having this in our Muslim community and our Hindu community. But the funny thing is we're not hearing too much about this. But the thing about I found in a lot of the research as we were preparing for this episode, and I want to thank my team for helping bring the research to my attention. So take a look at this. What I did was highlighted parts of articles that we found. So when you have a chance, you can go back to this and go to the entire article. So take a look at this one. North Hampshire Imam guilty of sexual assaulting boy. That's in the UK, so it's BBC. So you can take a look at that. That was on May 23rd, 2018. But the thing I wanted to bring your attention to is look at the highlighted red where it says indecent touching happened from 1990 to 1992. At the time, the victim was aged 12 to 13. Take a look at that carefully again and read between the lines what I'm saying to you. Indecent touching happened from 90 to 92 when that child was between the ages of 12 to 13. Let's go to the next slide. Here's another one for you. He counseled a teen for years, but she says he was grooming her for sex. And our therapist, Bibi Roberts, will talk to us about some information on grooming, what that means. So this was actually in Texas, right here in the United States. So as I said, you can take a look at the headline and pull it up on Google and get the expanded version of this article. But what I wanted to highlight this part to you, is what the Muslims are doing in Texas. And I'm so moved by this that I'm actually going to reach out to the organization that is pushing this movement. So the highlighted part says, those who know her says it's a landmark moment for Muslims saying Me Too, hence the Me Too, beyond the Me Too movement today. So the Muslim community, I have to say, are pushing this out of the carpet and bringing it to the surface. And a lot more is happening within that. So the other part that is highlighted on the bottom, if you can take a look, the part that says, was a trusted spiritual guide who counseled her since she was 13. He was privy to her biggest teenage problems, an absentee father. She didn't have a father around. Discord with her mother and bullied at school. So I'm just trying to bring some things to your attention and we'll explain to you why. So pay attention to the highlighted parts of these slides that we're putting up. Let's take a look at the next one. The Hindu priest charged with sexual assault at Surrey Temple. This was, I believe, in Vancouver, right? A Hindu priest who has been working in lower mainland temples for about 20 years has been charged with sexual assault. So these are actually cases that individuals were arrested, charged, and criminal actions were taken against them. Let's go to the next one. So I'm hoping that those of you who are tuning in and those in our audience are seeing a pattern with this. So here's one, right in Guyana, and this is by Kaichor News. Muslim scholar gets 45 years jail for rape of boy. This just happened March 15, 2019. And take a look at the highlighted part. As I said, for anyone who is tuning in and would like to see the full article, go to the headlines and you can pull that up online. because it would have been too much for me to post the entire article. So I'm just giving you the highlight of this. So this was in Guyana, and we have a large number of our viewers coming in from Guyana. So here's one that many of you may know. And here's a guy, Muslim scholar, Nasim Ali. Ali was indicted for raping the child in 2011. The charge alleged that Ali, between December 5th, 2011 and December 31st, 2011, engaged in sexual penetration with a child under the age of 17 by abusing his position of trust while being an imam at the Turkine Masjid. Let's go to the next slide. Another one in Guyana. This was in 2015. Religious body minister condemned alleged rape by pandit. And let's take a look at the highlight. Family of 22-year-old lady from the Upper Quarantine, which is Region 6 area, was reportedly raped by a Playboy pandit. Check the article. Even for the reporter to even make comments like that, you know, a Playboy pandit of number 57 Village Quarantine. And take a look at the bottom part, because the Dharmic Sabha, which is one of the Hindu, I believe the Hindu Dharmic Sabha in Georgetown, said Dharmic Sabha would like to appeal to Hindus and others not to be duped by persons pretending to heal or cure ailments. We advise, as we have done in the past, the persons who are ill should seek medical attention, not be prey to those who would exploit them under religious pretexts. And that's exactly what's happening. And how many cases do we have like that? And if you take a look at this guy was caught, this supposedly Playboy pandit, was caught having sex with the young lady that he was supposed to, as the Hindus say, jare, right? Jare her to take whatever was wrong with her. And then I have another friend, a longtime friend, coming in from Trinidad who does a lot of spiritual work. Her name is Devika Jagadar. And she posted a post the other day on April 9th that, you know, really troubled me and was on a similar pattern of that particular post about the pandit. And then she mentioned here that these women breathe a sign of relief when I tell them that they're being tricked into having sex, while the Baba, supposedly priest, relieves himself sexually. I'm not going to, you know, go into much more, but if any of you are interested in that post, it was on April 9th, and when they were talking about sexual demons that are supposed to be possessing these women. So there's a lot of, you know, things that are happening that are misguided by the Hindu priests. So today, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for tuning in, and I hope that that information was informative to you. You can always go back at the end of this program and review this to its entirety. And as I said, again, I'm asking you in the next 30 seconds, please tag, share, and tag as many people as you can, because it's so important for this information to get out. We need to have this episode go viral and go as far wide as we can, because this is the time we need to take action. So this episode of Let the Woman Speak Beyond the Me Too movement, we're providing information for early intervention, prevention, attention to the warning signs that we will talk about. Children needs should be put first. And it's important, as I said, you're not going to go to a patent lawyer, an international properties lawyer for information on sexual violence. You're going to get that information from the right kind of help. And if you have any questions you want to ask, inbox us. We'll find some of the resources. I'm actually currently working on putting a resource, something together that will be provided information for persons that might be seeking help, that might be tuning in and might not want to speak out about it just yet. So we're going to take a look at that. So anyone in our community can play a significant role in prevention and early intervention. And we're also going to talk about the recent legal developments right here in New York. So as may I ask those in our studio audience, please kindly put your phones on silent. And so let's scroll the numbers on screen. So anyone that has questions that might be tuning in, we have USA 718-551-3290, Canada 647-557-6200, Guyana 225-9054, Trinidad 653-9195, Globespan 24/7, live on Facebook as well as YouTube. So please share the numbers. If anyone wants to call in, you can be anonymous. So the information, you can be protected on the information that you are providing. So let me introduce you to our guests. So we have in our studio audience, in our studio right here, and I want to thank some of our guests that are in the audience who are mothers, who are young women here that I see right now, and young men. And this is an important conversation that we're having today. So we have with us, that is coming in via Skype, is Bibi Roberts, who is our consultant therapist, who deals with, she's trained, licensed on trauma therapy, counseling, and all the areas that we will be talking about. We have with us here in studio, we have Ryan Nasim, who's a licensed attorney in the state of New York. He's currently the Assistant Cooperation Counsel for the City of New York, where he prosecutes juvenile accused of committing crimes. But I'm gonna let Ryan expand a little bit about who he is. And I'm so happy because, you know, one thing that impresses me is when I see young people, younger than myself, of course, that are progressive, and I support that 100%. And we have some of our young people in our audience who I want to thank for joining us. So Ryan, I'm going to ask him to just highlight the work that you do, right? If you can do that for our viewers.
Thank you, Dianne, and thank you to Globespan 24/7 for having me today. So right now, I'm an assistant corporation counsel for the City of New York, and in that role, I work in family court prosecuting juveniles who are accused of committing acts which, if they were committed by an adult, would constitute a crime, and that's called juvenile delinquency. And in that capacity, I'm in the SVU unit, which is the Special Victims Unit, where we prosecute sexually based offenses. So the purpose for which I'm here today is pretty much to talk about and elaborate on the new recent legal developments, that being the Child Victims Act that was recently passed in New York. So anything that I say is for educational and informational purposes only. It should not be construed as giving legal advice or opinion, and no attorney-client relationship has been formed by doing so.
Thank you, Ryan. And you talked about the changes, right, that has happened in the state of New York. So how about giving some information? And as I said, for those who are tuning in via Globespan 24/7, know that this is specifically geared to New York, but if there's information that's needed, we'll provide some information to you. So please inbox if you're coming in from another state or you are coming in from another country, which we know we have. So we can be able to provide that information to you informatively. So Ryan, with the New York State CVA, right? Can you explain what the CVA is, and would you say this is justice at last?
Yes, so on February 14th of this year, New York State passed what's called the Child Victims Act, which Dianne is referring to as the CVA. And I would say that it provides access to justice for certain survivors and victims of sexually based offenses. I wouldn't say that it's justice at last, because it specifically targets people who were victims or survivors of sexual offenses at the time that they were children. So what it specifically does is it extends the statute of limitations, which is pretty much a time period for which you can bring a case to seek either criminal charges or civil charges against your perpetrator. It extends it both civilly, and it extends it for criminal charges. Prior to this enactment, New York's law was pretty restrictive on the civil side and the criminal side as well. If an act occurred to you while you were a child, a sexual act, the statute would, or the law would allow you to bring your claim. The clock wouldn't start ticking pretty much until you reached 18, the
Right.
age of majority, right? So in criminal charges prior to CVA, it would start at the time you were 18, and you would have 5 years, let's say, for a rape case. Now, what it does, the clock for criminal charges specifically doesn't start ticking until you are 23.
Okay.
So you have 5 years from that period.
And that's in the state of New York.
That's in the state of New York. And that's for criminal charges.
Mhm.
Now, for civil charges, what it does is it allows survivors and victims of sexual acts while they were children, obviously, to bring a claim up until their 55th birthday. And the other thing that it does, which I don't hear a lot of talk about, but it's, I think, one of the most important parts of the statute, is it provides a 1-year revival period. And that 1-year revival period starts this summer. I believe it may be July or August 14th of this year. And pretty much, regardless of your age, regardless if you brought a lawsuit in the past and it was dismissed because of statute of limitations grounds, or maybe a condition precedent to bringing a lawsuit for certain municipalities, you can now bring your claim, even
Right.
if you're 99 years old.
Wow, that's really good. So would you still say that justice at last?
I wouldn't say
No, you-
justice at last, because I think that more needs to be done to
I
address
agree.
other groups.
Yeah.
Because this act specifically targets survivors who were abused at the time that they were children.
Right. Okay, thank you, Ryan. Again, I'm just going to say this for our viewers tuning in and for children that might be in the space. There's some things that I'm going to say. I'm going to address words that might be inappropriate for young children. So kindly, again, as I asked, please remove them from the space as we proceed. And then, as I said, use at your discretion. So, Ryan, I'm going to take a pause with you so we can go to our guest, Nadira. So, Nadira is a mother who is joining us here today. And this is a mother that, as I said, is coming in, and she's going to show our viewers and those of us who are here the process of what happens when a parent, a mother, tunes in to, a child comes in, as I said earlier, and says, "Mom and Dad, I was molested by Pandit Worthless, or Imam Worthless, or, Pastor Worthless, and you all know why I'm saying worthless, because anybody who's doing something like that is seriously worthless. So, Nadira, again, thank you for joining us. Are you okay? You good? All right. So thank you for coming out and participating in this. And Nadira and I have been speaking for several months now, so we've been talking this through until we made the decision to do this episode today, and she agreed to do it. So I want to thank you so much. And, we got you, right? So, with the Hindu religion, I grew up as a Hindu. And, being back home at the mandir and stuff, and then with my mother being Catholic, I started going to Catholic church. So I sort of experienced everything. So, and so there's a lot of things about the Hindu faith that I don't know, and I know many of us may not know. So, but I wanted to, based on our conversation, Nadira, just to kind of go in the direction of how this whole process of sexual violence, sexual assault can come within the religious institution. So, from the Hindu faith, right? In our conversation that we had, you referred to something called the perfect storm, right? And the perfect storm was in a community which becomes like family, what you told me, as you mentioned. And you talked about something called, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, Pure Vishwas? Pure Vishwas, which is, you said, total faith. So tell me, about that, being in a Hindu temple setting within the community that you would call home, how being in that with you, your family, your children, and having Puri Viswas, right?
Firstly, thank you, Dianne, and the Globespan for having me here. And nice meeting you, Ryan.
Nice meeting you too.
I feel very comforting to see Aminta and Rohan here. Thank you for coming. And I must say, Diane, I'm really happy to have met you, and I feel like you've become a really good friend to me.
It's okay. Just take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. We're doing this together. I remember I said, I got your back. We have your back. And before you say anything, I'm going to say something, and I feel like crying now too. And that's because it bothers me when our women are trivialized within a community, when you call something slander, when you threaten a family, it becomes problematic. But I'll tell you something. For anybody that's tuning in, I'm not threatening you, but I'm very serious. I will not allow any of the women that I know within this community or any other community be intimidated by either your actions or anyone else's actions. And that's all I'm going to say. Enough said.
Okay. So, by Pure Vishwas, I mean that we had total faith in what we were doing. And we were taught that in the Hindu religion, whatever you do, you have to put your all in it. And we've been with that institution from its inception, from the time it started. And it's been in existence for 25 years, and we've stopped it's going to be 26 years this year, and we have stopped going for the past 3 years since we found out. So we've been there. My kids grew up there from small. My daughter is now 28. Okay. So
so before you continue, we're going to refer to, we're not calling names, we're not referring to religious institutions, names again. We're just going to refer to the child, whether it's he or she. So we'll just reference child, right?
Yeah.
So you talked about the Puri Viswa being within a religious institution and having a community. It's like having a community like where we are right now, you know, with those of us who are here. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it provides a safe space, which at least that's what you thought. Yeah.
Well, to a parent, a temple or a mandir or any church, I think, would be the safest place for your child. Mm-hmm. And in our case, we had grown so close to everybody there that I didn't think in my wildest dreams that I've had to watch out for anybody doing anything to a child in the temple. I would look out for any kid in the temple. And it never occurred to me that I have to, although I know in my neighborhood, when my kids went to regular school, I wouldn't send my children to the neighbor's house to sleep. Although my neighbors and I were very, very good friends. I knew they had older kids. I don't know how they conduct themselves in their house. I know they're good people, and I know not to send my kids there. I didn't know that I had to have that look out in a temple settings. We never slept there, but we went there. It was our second home. I didn't have anything else I did on my spare time but to be there. Right. The other things I did was to go on vacation, and the other place I spent my other time was at that place.
Okay. And let me ask you, I'm going to touch on something that we talked about also, because it was interesting for me, and it sensitized me to not just in the Catholic Church, the mandirs and the mosque, but it looks like it's happening everywhere. Mm-hmm. We talked about that thing called scripture shaming.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So in your observation on scripture shaming that can impact women, children by religious leaders, where do you see yourself as a mother or parent in a situation where a child alleges abuse by a religious leader? So we're speaking in general, right? So when you talk about scripture shaming, how does that fit in as a mother, you know, in a situation where a child might allege, you know, as I said earlier, mom and dad, you know, pandit worthless, you know, or imam worthless.
Well,
molested me.
in a case like that, say somebody come in and say that, okay, a pandit molested a kid. A pandit would then, or a priest would probably go to his books, and because they have command, they know where to go and seek a verse from, say, the Bhagavad Gita or something, and then come out and tell the audience, because they have that power to do that. They'll come out and make a service that person X, Y, and Z said, I did such and such to them, and then they'll read a section from, say, the Bhagavad Gita or something to say that, okay, let me show you where Lord Krishna said such and such, that this is going to happen in Kali Yuga. People are going to do these kinds of things, that watch out for it. And then the people, oh yeah, that is true. Pandit said the right thing there. You understand? So this is scripture shaming, and the Christians have it also, the Muslims have it, where the imam or the priest would come out and say things appropriate from the Bible or from the Bhagavad Gita or the Ramayana to shame their people. And I know an instance where, more than one instance, because remember, I've been in the system for a long time, where a brother was not being they were saying respectable to his big brother. And I'm in the audience sitting, and I hear this priest say that he went to the scriptures, the Ramayana, and he brought out a verse about how the small brother should be obeying his big brother. And it all sounds, I mean, it's from the scriptures, it's saying there, but you as a human being, you got to sit and you got to think with what is right and what is wrong.
Right.
These books are there to tell us, yes, what to do and guide us in our life, but we're living in a totally different, we're not living in the times when Lord Rama and Lord Krishna was roaming. We're in Kali Yuga, and these priests have to adjust to these days.
And also, I think I've seen, and you and I were having this conversation, where sometimes in the religious institution, if you have young children, especially teenagers, they get to a certain point where, they're interested in boys and girls, and they want to talk to the boys and girls. And the pandit might, get upset.
In my days, they did, because my daughter tried to have a friend, and my daughter she tried to have a friend in the temple, and we were called. The child had a friend in the temple who I feel she took as somebody to be there to protect her, kind of being a friend, because of course I'm always busy doing something. And we were reprimanded for that, and I know now their kids going to that place, and they are friends with boys and gonna be getting married to them or whatever it is. And nobody's saying anything. And in my days, we were reprimanded, we were called, and we were yelled at, made to feel badly that we're doing something badly, and it to end that relationship.
So it also sounds like when this stuff is happening within the religious institution, and let's say that religious leader is having feelings or whatever you want to call it with a young lady or so, he might get upset if the young lady wants to talk to a boy. So these are sometimes patterns. And I think it's Bibi Roberts. So our therapist is going to come in. And I want to just jump to Ms. Roberts, who is our clinician coming in. As I said, she's a certified trained trauma therapist and therapist in a variety of areas and covering for the program and the subject matter we're talking about today. So I've asked Bibi to touch on, as I said earlier, this segment is about prevention, information, right? I'm not here, or we're not here to lynch anyone. I'm not on a witch hunt, but I'm providing information, and I'm hoping that if anybody out there is tuning in, and if this sounds like you, I'm seriously asking you, you need to stop. Because, and you're going to understand why. Because you might think it's flirting, but it's much deeper than that. So we're going to ask Bibi Roberts, as she's tuning in, Bibi, are you there?
I'm here. Yes. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Bibi. And we have Nadira, the mom that we spoke about, and Ryan, who is the prosecutor. Bibi, why don't we go through some of the stuff we were talking about as the information provided to our viewers. Maybe we can start with the grooming.
Okay. So, first of all, I wanted to say the information shared today, it's not about a particular religion. There are general characteristics. It's about prevention and building awareness to our communities, our care providers, parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and for the general public. So it's not depicting one religion or any type of religious scriptures or what should be done. These are general based on research. And so I put together something very simple. We'll talk about the grooming process. And I think I have some slides. If not, I'll just go through them. And the grooming process, there's been a lot written on the grooming process for the children. Also, from my research, there's a grooming process for the caregivers as well and parents. Because the grooming process is developed through trust. The trust is starting to build from the inside, and that is from the person that's caring for that child. Or the grooming process, if any sort of if this is a young adult, the grooming process also starts with the adult as well as within the home, and it starts really with testing boundaries, seeing what's acceptable, and that could apply for both adults and children. And we know for children, I have a 5-year-old, he loves to be tickled. And so a grooming, testing boundaries also in a sexual way, tickling. A lot of back rubs for children as well as adults. And the grooming process is you're building trust. You're coming to the child. You're befriending that child in a way where they feel they can come to you. They can talk with you. They can refer to you. You're coming to the house. You're having a conversation with a parent, a caregiver, about, something in school, some issues in the family. You're breaking bread with that family. And so that kind of building a relationship, a grooming process is a relationship building technique. You're building a relationship with the child as well as with the caregiver at the same time. You may be asking, when is that child's birthday? You may bring a gift for that child, a toy for that child. That child now is expecting, when that child sees you, that child gravitates towards you. And it relieves the parent to say, oh, yes, Jerry he's really good with Tom. Or with Chloe. So then the parents or the caregivers relax. Another, giving lots of hugs to either an adult or a child, encouraging the child to maybe come and sit with them, sitting on the lap. And it just starts in. A grooming process could take months. It could take even years. There's no particular time period of when that person, if they're grooming them for a sexual or non-sexual act, how they make their move. But they keep testing the boundaries and what to do. They could start with back rubs. They could start with accidental sexual touching during a play, rough play. They may start wrestling, and during that act, they may be a sexual touching that the child, it goes unnoticed because it's so quick, it's so fast, but it happens. And later on, that child may come back in, something happened, but I don't know exactly what happened. And then it becomes a psychological manipulation. That now the child, it moves into the phase of, it could be the non-touching abuses, which is taking picture of a child. And so then in manipulating in, well, this is just between us. I'm just taking a little picture, I'm just taking a picture of this. Can you pose this way? And children love to pose. They love taking pictures. They could be sexual communication, and the language used could be a little sexualized. And it could also be exposing that child to magazines that's pornographic, to sexual tapes, to even masturbating in that child's presence. So you're grooming, you build that trust, you develop that relationship, and then the person then steps into testing boundaries. So this is a stage-by-stage process. Testing the boundaries, waiting, and then moving forward and forward into whatever it is that they envision that they wanted to do. And one of the things I did wanted to say, there's also the non-touching abuses, which I just touched on, which is sexualized conversation via phone, via texts, for more of a teenagers and adults, as well as hearing sexual acts, tapes, masturbating close by, exposing oneself, pictures, and then you have touching abuses, which is actually penetration, other kissing, other types of sexual acts, attempted intercourse also, masturbation also. So these are all parts of abuses. Ones where there's a lot of touching, there's touching involved, and ones where there's not touching. And just the grooming is an ongoing process, and it's a process to build that relationship of trust.
In regards to the grooming, if you had a parent coming in, not sure what's happening, the child is having trouble sleeping, nightmares, etc., what would you tell them in terms of possibility of maybe looking at something like this that might be happening? Or what could you tell our viewers that might be tuning in, that might be going to a religious institution, that might be seeing some patterns of something happening? Because I think Nadira has experienced something like that. So we'll hear from her in a minute. But from a therapeutic standpoint, what would you tell that parent, as you're developing that relationship, with them, and assessing the level of what's happening with the child?
I like that word that you just used, assessment. When a parent comes in and they're concerned about their child, and let's say, for example, their child is not sleeping, appetite issues, we assess for their environment changes, what's their life. So now we're looking at the linkage and relationships that may impact that child. And so if that child is part of a community religious organization, let's say Bible study, I use that in general terms, then we also look at that relationship. So we're not going to just segment into one area, but we look at how the child's environment and all the systems within it that may impact that child.
Okay. Let's hear from Nadira. Hearing what Bibi, our therapist, has said in terms of the grooming, and in terms of what, from a therapeutic standpoint. So as a mother, and if there are mothers tuning in, that might be going to these religious institutions, whether a Catholic church, a Mandir, or so on, and experiencing what you did. What were some of the things that you would say or encourage a mother to pay attention to?
Well,
if you had to do it all over again, what would you have looked at?
Well, one of the major things that my daughter started, this child started doing was she was reluctant to wake up in the mornings to go to temple. and she would make us late like almost every Sunday morning. And I think we were stupid, I would say stupid, to say that, she's lazy, is teenager, this is how teenagers are, she's getting lazy. That's one of the things that Sarika, I would tell her, get up, you have to get up, we got to go, you got to do this, you got to do this, we got to have so many things to be done there. You got to come, let's go. So she would get up and she would come and she would do, actually she was so obedient, she did everything we wanted her to do. So in the meantime, when she was in her late high school, 17, the child, she was, she started having these like horrible dreams, paralyzing nightmares, like she can't sleep at night. And it continued until she went to college. The child went to college, sorry. And so when this happened, now, of course, we have a guru, so we went to the guru and the guruma, and we asked them, we told them what's going on with this kid. And I remember so well that she told me that her child was also going through the same thing, that it's this transition from high school, writing your SAT, getting into college, all this anxiety. And it sounded really convincing. I mean, because that really was a hard time, and this kid is very dedicated to everything that she does. So I said, yeah, that's what it is, because all this she's probably stressing over which college she's going to get in and which one she wants to go to. The child wants to whatever college the kid wants to go to. So that was the answer to that, anxiety, and it continued. So you saw some anxiety level change in a manner that you didn't see before. Right. So and she didn't want to go, the child didn't want to go to Mandir, and the child didn't, started having those nightmares and stuff like that. So there were some things happening that you didn't key in on. So I think what we would tell someone tuning in is that pay attention to, as Bibi Roberts, our therapist, said, there are nonverbal cues, right? That could happen as well as the verbal. So we're going to move on ahead. Yes?
Dan, quickly, yes. That's really, really good. And a prevention piece is paying attention to your children. When they're off, it doesn't mean that it has to be something, a major big T trauma or something major, but paying attention, asking questions. And a lot of children who are abused don't come forward until they're an adult. So we're not learning about these experiences until they seek counseling, whether on a college campus or as a young adult or in middle life. So one in 6 boys are going to be abused by the age of 18, the research has shown, and 1 in 4 girls. So these are numbers. These are numbers that I'm not making up. I'm not pulling out of a hat. This is across the board, and this is important to look at to make sure that as a parent, you have a child, you're caring for a child, you're a grandmother, whomever you are, that listen to your child. Trust your instinct, listen to your child, and don't just listen and let it go fly away somewhere.
And to add to that too, Bibi, we need to start believing them when they're saying things that uncle or Pandit Worthless touch me in my private, And as I said, I'm going to say some things that might be uncomfortable for some people. So I'm going to throw this one to Ryan. Is it on? I think it keeps going off. Huh? No, I have to ask him this stuff first. Use this. Okay. Is it on? Yeah. Okay. I apologize for the delay in the sound. So this is going to go to Ryan. So Ryan, we talked about the changes and the extension and the impact of the SOL, the statute of limitation, right? But regarding, and I think we need to clarify this for our viewers, when we talk about rape, right? And the difference between vaginal rape and anal. I'm not going to use the word rape, but looking at it from the criminal sexual act. Can you explain that a bit?
Yeah, so rape, when you think of rape, it's a very emotionally charged word, right? And a lot of people who are survivors or victims of the act that we refer to as rape, we refer to it as any sort of forcible penetration. But in New York, with respect to criminal law, rape essentially is only vaginal penetration. So if a person was forcibly penetrated in their anus, their perpetrator could never be charged with rape. What else does that mean? A woman could never rape a man under New York law. A man can never be raped. And that's pretty much just historically where the term rape comes from. And historically, it comes from the idea that women are property. And the crime of rape was a crime against a man's property. That you took his wife or his daughter's virginity before someone else should have. So that's why rape is specifically for vaginal penetration and not anal. But there are different charges in New York State that address any forcible anal penetration, and that would be called criminal sexual act.
All right, thank you, Ryan. As we have up on screen, we have a survey. For those of you who are tuning in, can you take a look at the questions? And if you can give your comments online on the Globespan 24/7 below on the comment section. So we have 3 questions. Take a look at that. And I'm not going to go through the questions, but take a look at it and see if you can give us some feedback on those questions. So Ryan, thank you again for that. And so let me ask you one other part to this. Walk me through, briefly, a case scenario. So a case comes to you or to your unit, right? The sexual violence unit. Walk me through what actually happens so our viewers could understand when a situation like this arises, whether within a religious institution, within the schools, or any place. What happens when it comes to you?
Yeah, so I work with a lot of children. So in most of my cases, my complaining witness or my victim or survivor is a child. Most of the time, Bibi spoke about children not disclosing what happened to them, the abuse that happened to them until they're adults. Most of the time, it comes to us through the child disclosing to someone who's in a mandating reporting capacity, that being maybe a teacher, a therapist, a doctor, a nurse, someone who's taking the responsibility to kind of question this child and ask them if everything's okay, and the child feels comfortable enough to disclose what it is has happened to them. And so what happens is the mandating reporter then calls it in, essentially, and we get the cases through a law enforcement referral by and through NYPD. That's one way that a case can come in. Another way that a case could come in is obviously through disclosing it to NYPD.
Okay, thank you so much. And again, as our viewers are tuning in, as I said earlier in this episode, in this broadcast, that we're not here, I am not here to witch hunt anyone, to go after anyone, for any manner. But as an advocate and an activist, and I've worked on some very high-profile cases, and as I said, I will not allow any of the women in my circle, any of the women that I work with, including Nadira Persaud, to be intimidated by anyone. And I'm going to make that clear, right, to the viewers tuning in and anyone who might see Yeah. So I'm just going to touch on, because in terms of time and with parents that might be tuning in, parents are secondary victims, Nadira, right? So we talked about what are some of the things we say to a child, like, and we touched on this already. So can you just highlight that just quickly in terms of, you know, the secret, don't tell? What would you tell a mother tuning in that might have, you know, this child might have kept a secret, who's a teenager, right? And then after therapy and intervention, decides at 28, Mom and Dad, I have something to tell you.
Right. So,
What would you tell?
well, remember, I think our case is kind of different because we were so close knit. When I spoke about the perfect storm, and what a perfect family unit we were with this particular place. And so whatever the kid came and told us, there's sometimes we would always give the guru the benefit of the doubt. So there are instances where she had come and we had little, you know, they would call us and we would be talking about things, and the guru always ended up being the right one. So for her to come and tell us something, when we talked to her later on, she said the child. When we spoke to the kid later on, and she said, "Mom," I always say this. Sorry. She said, "Mom, can you imagine me coming and tell you guys, and I know what would have happened. I know that it would have gone back to the person, and there would have been like a consoling kind of thing going on, you know, the kid misinterpret that touch, or this is all blown out of context here." And again, she would have been belittled and go sit in a corner, you're a kid.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break from our guest, and we're going to go to some of our online comments.
Bantu Babu says, "Hi Dianne, keep up the good work all." Harry Nage says, "Excellent topic and good discussion expected." Nui Sultana says, "This is fantastic and I agree more definitely needs to be done." Chitra Singh says, "Very controversial topic that is finally being discussed openly in the beginning of a new era. I'm here." And Rubina Solomon says, "It's a great honor to support the excellent work of Dianne. I stand with you, Miss Persaud. I am happy you chose to speak out."
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in and giving us that feedback, because it's so important. And as I said earlier, folks, Globespan is expanding across the globe, and our viewers have increased tremendously, and the support that have come back, the comments, the messages that I've received on our shows. So we are going to be doing much more. And this topic, even though an hour or so may not be enough time to bring this conversation to light, we will do more of this. Ryan, I want to touch on one thing lastly with you. If we were looking at resources, we talked about this is focused on New York. This conversation is focused on New York. Where can someone that might be tuning in Arizona or Texas or California tune in and look at the statute of limitations, because that's an important thing, right? Where can you tune in to look at what might be happening? So a mother that might be living in Texas and tuning in with us right now and say, "Oh, well, wait a second, my child is exhibiting some stuff like that. Let me take a look." And if they actually acknowledge that, where can I go? You know?
So I think one very good resource is rain.org. It's spelled RAINN.
Can we put that up on screen? Repeat it again.
RAINN.org, which is the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network Hotline. And RAIN provides various resources for parents and any survivor, as well as the resources to find out the statute of limitations and any laws that are applicable to your state.
And we also have organizations within our community that are working with our women in healing and trauma of sexual violence and abuse. And on June 22nd, we're going to have some connection with these organizations. We're going to talk about what some of the things that are happening right here in New York and the work that they're doing. So as we're moving along, I do want to say to our viewers and to our audience, the takeaway from this segment, some of the things that I sort of like put together and I just want to share with you real quickly. Number one, take all the reports of abuse seriously. Don't matter when they happen. And as Ryan said, the person can be 99 years old. You know, there are criminal and civil charges that can be filed. Know that perpetrators are in a position of power, right? And these are the religious leaders in the mandirs, in the mosques, and in the Catholic churches. And as I said, highlighted early on when we started, that the Catholic Church has had a tremendous amount of exposure on this happening in the Catholic Church, right? Then what I found and our team put together was looking at the Muslim religion, how much that is being exposed. And there's an organization in Texas, I forgot the name, I wrote it down somewhere, but I'll if anyone is interested who is from the Muslim faith, could reach out to Globespan 24/7 on the message, or Dianne M at letthewomenspeak.com, and I can provide that information to you. But so it's good to see that the Muslim religion is stepping up in that, and we need the Hindu religion to step up a lot more, you know, and to be able to call these religious leaders out, and action needs to be taken. Another thing I want to touch on is the importance of evidence. And I'm going to just jump to Ryan real quick. Ryan, in terms of physical evidence that someone might need, can you touch on that real quickly?
So we look at various forms of evidence. Obviously, this statement by the survivor, or in our practice, we refer to them as a victim. We will take their statement and any corroborating evidence that we can use. And corroborating evidence can come from any source. So obviously there's DNA evidence, which we would recommend is preserved soon. If it's a penetration charge, then roughly within 72 hours from that occurrence. But if not, if there is no DNA evidence, we look at other types of evidence, such as what we would call as a prompt outcry. So the first person that this survivor disclosed this to, and most importantly, what's very useful now is social media.
And things are in text messages,
dissemination
emails.
of child pornography, threats.
And so another thing I have on my list, aside from the physical evidence, is what actually happens. And a lot of the research have stated that it's a combination, and Bibi stated this too, a combination of years of exploitation of these young adults or children. The second thing is an influential religious leader taking advantage of struggling teens or young women. Another one is a victim needs a sense of closure, and that is so important. So as I was saying earlier, if anyone is tuning in who you find yourself exhibiting these types of behavior, and it sounds like you, and you know what they say, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it must be a duck. And like Pastor Lisa would say, I'm just keeping it real, right? So hashtag keep it real. So it's time to hold our religious leaders accountable. So important. And another thing that's important that I've recognized, and Nadira has shared this with me, the repercussions of coming out, and not just on the victim side, but the family who become like secondary victims. The gossip that can hurt a family's social standings. Can you believe that? A family that would have to be put to shame, and it's like shriveling it up in a corner and hiding because, my child came out and said this, and it happened, right? So, as in the Muslim communities, and as I said earlier, the Hindu communities are being left out of the Me Too reckoning, right? We started this in 2017 because of the traditions that enforce a culture of silence. And I think we need to stop being silent in terms of what's been happening, because what I said earlier is in terms of victims and victim shaming, you know, calling this slander. This is not Slander Saturday. This is information and preventive measures that we are providing to you on this episode. And I hope the information that we have given you thus far is informative, and we will continue to do that. Prevent future abuse of vulnerable people by the perpetrators or any person in power. And doing the research, I found something I wanted to share. Oh yes, I found the organization for the Muslim community. It's called Facing Abuse in Community Environment, FACE. It's a new Texas-based nonprofit led by Muslim women, pushing for transparency and victims' rights in the handling of abuse claims in Islamic settings. And they have been very successful.
Can I interject a little bit?
Can you hold that thought for a second?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm so happy that women are forming that group, because in my case, all my friends, they're like against what I said. They can't believe that this person did something like that. And they continue to support him and want to be my friend at the same time. And I said to them, you can't do that. It's one or the other. And they're not supportive. So we need supportive people. If somebody come forward, we are not a family that's been on the street and came out and trying to get against this one person. They need to listen, and Guyanese women don't listen.
Right. Know that, as we said earlier, folks, that this is not, I'm not witch hunting anyone. This happens to the Christian religion, the Catholic religion, the Muslim religion, the Hindu religion, Buddhist, and all religions. If you do the research online, which our team have done, the cases I've highlighted earlier, those were just a few. Let me tell you something. All week, we were looking at cases, and I was just so blown away of how this is, but it's been kept under the rug, and folks have been silent. So one thing I want to touch on real quick is a comment that I found on Facebook that was in support of this situation. And it was the way that this gentleman pointed out, and he's from the Shri Shakti Maria Ma Temple. Is that how he said? He said, and his name is Dave Kutia. Is that Kutia? Mm-hmm. Kutia. And Dave said, this was on December 7th when there was exposure of this situation within the community. He said, it's time for religious leaders and organizations, that means all of us folks, to recognize and embrace the intersectionality between religion and social issues facing their congregation. Again, that group I mentioned regarding the Muslim religion is called FACE. So you can take a look at that, and if anyone is going through a situation that can be provided. I think we're going to take some questions from our studio audience.
Hi. I'm here today because I've been recently made aware of the Me Too movement in our community. I'd prefer to be anonymous, if that's okay. So my reason for being here today is there's been a lot of talk about the Me Too movement in our community, and as a frequent participant of local Mondays, I kind of want to know, we're being made aware of this problem, but what do I say to like my younger cousins, younger people in the Mundir? How do I look out for them? What are some of the things that I can do? And not only the little girls, but also the boys, because I understand, we have to believe the victims. I'm a strong supporter of the Me Too movement, but also a lot of the young boys are kind of afraid because the Me Too movement, while it's a very positive influence, there's always negativity on the other flip side. So, for example, what if allegation is being made against a boy? What is something that he could do about that?
Okay. I think, as Ryan said earlier, the reporting process is very important, and the timely manner. Ryan, you can jump in with me here. If something comes up and the physical evidence we talked about, you have some kind of evidence, it's important to immediately report it to the police, right? And then it will go to the district attorney's office. Ryan, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think in terms of prevention, because I think that's the focal point of your question, in terms of prevention, one thing that we saw a lot with delayed disclosure in some of my cases is the parenting. What happens at home, right? So a lot of the parents probably in some of those cases didn't talk to their kids about, if someone touches you here or in your private part, you have to let mommy know. That was a common theme in a lot of my cases. But in the cases where we had quite active disclosure, immediate, from a 6-year-old or a 4-year-old, they knew that was wrong. And they were able to see the signs. So I think that, part of the prevention is basically just speaking to your kids.
I agree. And I think there are books.
Add to what Ryan said to change the story is also bystander. The bystander approach. If you see something, you report it. You tell someone about it. If you see something inappropriate that child may not tell an adult, you step in and tell someone about it. So there are a lot of observers and bystanders in many situations that let things play out, and they just don't want to intervene. But at the prevention or early intervention, you see something doesn't look right, trust your judgment, err on the side of caution, and said, hey, you know what? Don't touch that child that way. Or that doesn't look right. Just step in.
I also want to add to Bibi and to respond to your question. There are things that you can put in place. I don't live in New York, and I would be willing to make myself available to any organization or to anyone in their mandate to come in. And Bibi will be joining me in May, and we'll see based on the time available. I don't have a problem coming out, which I've done in the past years ago, speak at Mandares in terms of talking about some of this stuff, maybe educating some of our young kids in terms of, the touching, the appropriate touching, inappropriate touching, because I think our kids need to be informed. And there are ways to do that can be educational and not be threatening and say, get angry with them when something like this happens, because then you're going to put them into a shock or scare them. So it's important to have dialogues, have conversations with your kids. And as Ryan said, that, and Bibi also said, you have to have this communication open with the younger children. When things, as I said before, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, I'm sorry, folks.
The parents in my generation, I think they need to wake up, really. They're still living in the past. They're still living in my grandparents told me this and my great-grandfather did this and this is how we're going to do it. We got to change. We have to support the children, the young adults and the young kids that are coming up. We have to support them and give them positions in temples so they can talk, because we are outdated. And it's the fact.
Yeah, I agree with you. We need to start changing the mindsets of the older generation and, being more proactive, because, one of the things that I think the older generation don't understand is when a young child goes through a traumatic event like this and then they become an adult, like a 16-year-old who might have been molested or raped, and then now they're adult, whether they're 28, whether they're 55, whether they're 65. And we see a lot of people coming out who are older, and it becomes problematic because what you don't understand is the long-term effects that comes with trauma. And I think we have a question from our studio audience.
So I'm also having a bad hair day. Plus, I feel like it's a sensitive
So you needed a hat like mine.
Yeah, I love it. Oh yeah, I'd prefer not to be on camera. So first of all, I'm really glad I was here today because that's my fault.
Okay, start again.
I'm really glad to be here today because as a young woman in the Okay, thank you. As a young woman of the Indo-Caribbean community, I'm graduating college, I'm going out into the world, and honestly, the Me Too movement has brought to light that a lot of powerful men take advantage, and it's something really good for me to know as I pursue my professional life, but that aside. So I go to college in, I don't want to sacrifice my anonymity, but in New York City, where there's a large Muslim and Indo-Caribbean and South Asian community. And a lot of the things that I've seen is that there is a very highly stigmatized nature of sex. And I think that that has to be dealt with in our community because I feel that a lot of females feel inclined to lie to their parents about certain events to cover up the fact that they may have engaged in premarital sex or sex with other people. So how do you suggest that we reduce that stigma and possibly reduce the amount of like lying we have to do to our parents and community members and stuff like that?
I'm looking at Nadira because as, you know, older women, younger women, so to speak, like us, when stuff like this happens, and I'm not a mother, so I'm going to have, as from a mother's perspective, Nadira, you touch on that, and then I'll jump in. And Bibi, you can touch on this too? Is she still there with us? You go ahead.
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, Nadira, let Nadira go, and then you can jump in. Hold on a second. Go ahead.
So if I understand the question, in the case of the child that we're talking about, she was not a kid that was out there because, as I said, she spent the child spent most of her time in that organization. And I had alluded before that she did have a friend in the temple, and she was told not to have that friend. And I feel that for our girls, we should not judge them based on that. Mm-hmm. We should not judge them based on if they're out there and they're trying to blame somebody else. It's like, that's very lame. You shouldn't do that.
Let me just add to this, because as you were talking to Nadira, you reminded me of something. And as I said, I'm from the older generation as Nadira. So I remember growing up and coming from a Guyanese community, migrating here as a child, you know, you become somewhat rebellious. Yes, I was rebellious. One of the things my mother used to do, and God rest her soul, you know, and I remember this today, and I share this with the young people in my family. When we had the trials and tribulations, this might respond to you, and to mothers who might be tuning in. Write letters to your kids. Leave it for them, because you'd be surprised the impact that the letters could have. Because I think nowadays parents are so afraid to communicate because the kids are going to get upset, they're going to get angry, you know, you don't know how to say it, you know, you don't know how to have those conversations, especially when a child is going through some traumatic stuff. So one of the things that I would say is write a letter to your child, you know, expressing to them how you feel. My mother did it to me, and I'll tell you something. I was rebellious at the time, but reflecting back as an adult, on those letters, it really impacted me. And for the young lady who asked that question in our studio audience, flip the script. You can do the same thing, because I think sometimes with the younger generation, you don't know how to have that conversation, you know, and it's okay. You know, it's so important, especially within our culture, especially the Indians, the Hindus, the Muslims. You know, you come from Guyana or some of the Caribbean parts where, you know, you're afraid to have those conversations, you know. You're afraid to tell your mom, Mom, you know, or Dad, there's a boy that I like. And wait a second, you're 22 years old. I'm guilty of that. But I was one that, you know, you always find the parent that you feel most comfortable with, and you tackle them. You know what I mean? And sometimes for girls, it could be their dad. Because when I was growing up, it was my father. Yeah. I would be the one to go tell him those things too.
And please don't forget that my daughter came out as an adult. my child came out as an adult. She wasn't a kid trying to hide anything. This kid, she had nothing to hide, you know. So if she had, probably if the kid had come out when she was 17, 18, or 19 and says, there would have been some question around that, right? But she was the kid was in her late 20s when she came up when the kid came out. So there is no question about you. A person in her, when a kid is 25, 26, you don't ask them questions and care about that part of sex in their life. And why would at 25 a kid would want to blame somebody?
Yeah,
that's ridiculous.
If I may interject, that's some of the challenges that sometimes I hear as a therapist with parents. I hear from my peers and from attending many different conferences and conversation that parents kind of, it's like on a seesaw. What is this all about? So it's important for parents not to start a conversation at 17 or to have these dialogue continuously with your children, both females and males. And so when things are happening or someone senses something different, they're like, hey, Mom, you know what? Or here, Dad, or here, Auntie. You know, something happened today. I'm not sure what it was, but this is what happened to me today. I don't know how to feel about it, but it was unusual. And so those are conversations that open to say, hey, you know what? Well, that shouldn't have happened to you. And then you start opening, expanding that, okay, maybe I need to have a conversation with that person about this experience. But these conversations about relationships, about dating, about all this doesn't start. Working on a college campus as a counselor, I find that parents sometimes start the conversation in when the child's a teenager, and you got to start it a little earlier about many things about life. These are life skills, really.
Yeah. I agree with you on that, Bibi, that, you know, that conversation is so important. So to the young lady who asked that question, thank you so much. And if you're having a difficult time with that as well, of what was just asked, try sitting down and writing a letter to your parent, you know, or trying to get them at a, you know, or choose the parent that you feel most comfortable with that could be your ally to talk to the other parent regarding either if it's a relationship or you're struggling with something along those lines. I think we have, as we're over time at this point, so we have another question from our audience. The topic is getting really good, so go ahead, please.
Hi, sorry if I'm cutting into your time, but
that's all right.
I'm really glad that I came here because while I'm not, you know, a girl or a female, I'm really close to my mom, my sister, and I think that this is something that definitely needs to be talked about more. And I really appreciate, you know, the endeavors that have been going on in this show and everything. So as a young man, I recently started college. And I understand the sensitive nature of, you know, sexual violence, sexual harassment, and it's something that's very nuanced in a sense that, you know, it's not very concrete, but something that I'm worried about as a young man and something that my mom always tells me, she always tells me to be very careful around girls because of the nature of the Me Too movement and everything that's going on today. So something that I kind of wanted to ask, maybe our professional here can answer because it's more of like, you know, a legal spin on it. But as a young man, how do I conduct myself in such a way where perhaps if I'm in a scenario where I hurt a girl's feelings and we were in a relationship, for an example, and where maybe everything that was done was with consent, mutual consent, maybe she comes back and accuses me of something that I never did, or it was under a consensual context. How do I deal with false allegations as a young man especially, or even for some people that are older that, you know, because of a sense of revenge from the female directed towards the male, how do we deal with things like that as a young man? Thank you.
That is a very good question. But the substance of it, just for me, sounds like a legal advice type of question with respect to defending yourself, right? And defending yourself against maybe something that could be considered a false accusation. So with respect to that, I wouldn't be able to answer any questions, unfortunately.
And here's how I would address that. If, as a young man going to college and whatnot, and something is happening, and you say it's false allegation, but keep in mind, sometimes in terms of men to female relationships or other, sometimes you might think that what you're doing is not an inappropriate act. You know, let's say you met someone, right, a girl, and you know you like her a lot, and you know you want to have sexual relations with her, you know, and you know, you're moving along the relationship. It's 6 months, and she's not, you know. And as I said, viewers, I'm going to say some stuff that might make people uncomfortable, but it's keeping it real. So you're in that situation, right? And but you think it's not inappropriate, and you actually just end up forcing her to do something that she didn't want to do. And especially if a woman says in a relationship, and it happens in marriages too, where the woman might say, hey, stop, I don't want to do this. And, oh, come on, baby, you know, whatever, you know. But when a woman says stop or no, it means no. You understand? So my point to you is that it's the way it's looked at and it's presented. Sometimes you might not think it's inappropriate because you think, oh, I touched her breasts, right? And it's no big deal. I'm just flirting. Absolutely not. It's an inappropriate act. So you might think it's a false allegation, but you have to step back and look at it, you know. And if it was an inappropriate act, you know, I would suggest either at that particular point apologize. And as you said, with the Me Too movement, it's so problematic, you know, because of some cases where there are false allegations. You have to be careful in relationships. So when you are with someone, I think it's important, if you're in a relationship with someone, you know, ask, is it okay if I touch you here? You know, is it okay? I mean, there was a time when we didn't have to do stuff like, but we have to be really careful because it's how people are interpreting this. And the other part to that is if you're dating someone that you might not know they have been raped or sexually molested as a child, and you're now in a relationship with them, guess what's going to happen? They're going to exhibit some traumatic experiences that you might just fall prey to that. When I say fall prey to that, where you don't know unless the girl comes to you and say, hey, hon, you know, I don't like you touching me there because, you know, I was sexually molested and so on. So be sensitive about that, you know, and I appreciate you asking that. And I think we have another question.
One additional to the young man's question. It's definitely a lot of the legal side of that, but on a general context, from working on a campus, let's say something happens under the influence of alcohol or something. It's the campus has policies that they follow, and then there's a further investigation where both parties have a burden of proof to an extent. So I get his perspective. It's a fine line at times to walk and to understand where someone is in, what space they are in that moment. And so these are just a new way of building relationships and connecting with each other that we're navigating these days. And so the legal aspect, but definitely there's, you know, someone can wake up tomorrow and say, hey, you know what? I didn't consent to that. I felt coerced from that. So there's definitely that point, and there's definitely a burden of proof that goes forward. And if
all right, thank you, Bibi. We have to
reported, yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you. I'm so sorry, folks, that we are running out. We're going to take one last question, and then we're just going to close it. But because of this conversation extending the way that it did, Bibi is coming in, will be in studio in May, and we're going to expand on this conversation a little bit more, right? So Bibi, you'll join me. We'll do this in May. And we'll talk about this and how we can continue this conversation, because I think it's very interesting, and some of our studio audience had some very interesting questions. So go ahead. Yeah.
So I just wanted to thank all of you for doing this today. Auntie Nadira, thank you for doing this. Dianne, thank you for continuing this conversation. Ryan, thank you for your legal expertise. A couple months ago, myself and 3 other women decided to write a piece specifically on sexual abuse happening in religious spaces. And that was not an easy thing for any of us, particularly because all of us are very devout Hindus. And the first thing that a lot of people said was, you're trying to bring down the Hindu faith by doing this, by uncovering and starting this conversation. But that's actually absolutely not what we were trying to do. What we were trying to do is hold leaders accountable and ensure that those leaders are not the ones who end up in the pulpits, but that we lift up the right leaders. And so I just wanted to say that, and to say that this is the first time that there's such a dialogue, very specific and very apparent dialogue, not trying to put anything under the carpet, but really having a vocal, honest conversation about things that are going on in our community. And I just wanted to also say, this is more of a comment, sorry, but it's important to believe survivors. One of the first things when a survivor comes forward, in general, with regard to sexual abuse, sexual violence, sexual assault, that people do is say, what did she do to cause that? What did he do? What did he or she do to cause that? And that is not the question that we should be having at the very onset. The first thing we should do is believe that survivor and develop a space where survivors feel comfortable. In this community, that might not be the case. Survivors might not feel comfortable. And so what we need to do, and I think that having these dialogues is just destigmatizing and allowing people to feel comfortable and normalizing the conversation. So thank you for doing that and for normalizing this conversation. We're allowing survivors to feel wrapped up in love and protection. And we will, as a group, as a community, continue to have these conversations. Dianne, again, thank you so much for having this conversation. It really validates everything that all of us have been trying to do in all the ways that we can.
Well, and thank you, Minton. As we're going to have to wrap up because we have our 2 o'clock segment that's coming on. Mm-hmm. So we're going to continue this conversation in May when Bibi Roberts is here with us on a mental health forum. I want to thank our studio audience for questions that came in, comments and so on, and thank you for the viewers tuning in. And thank you particularly to our guests. Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time out today and joining us and being so informative in this dialogue. And I hope we're going to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
And Nadira, thank you again. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say one last thing, that it's important for when a mother comes out and says something like this, that she gets support from her friends and the community. And I see there is division. I know people close to me, I told them, and this person, they hold him so close to his heart, to their heart.
Well, that's
and
been
it's hurtful,
right? And that's been happening. And it's again, it's not just the Hindu religion, and we're not here to witch hunt anyone. This is the Catholic, the Buddhist, all religions. This is happening to. And I think what this discussion is about is to be informative. We're providing information in preventative measure. And also, Bibi Roberts coming in via Skype. Bibi, thank you so much for this information. And I will call you shortly because we need to have a conversation on some of this stuff and moving into May. So we have a lot of important episodes that are coming up. And stay tuned for the 2 p.m. Program. With Globespan 24/7, and also don't forget to tune in next Saturday at 12 with Pastor Lisa for Affairs of the Heart, keeping it real, and as we're doing here also, keeping it real. So thank you so much for tuning in, much appreciated. Have a good afternoon, folks.